Today we're going to be upgrading the factory navigation system in this 2015 Lexus GX460. We're going to go from this to this. It has a much larger screen. It's going to bring along a new computer and faster responses, also updated with CarPlay and all the modern apps. As a result of this new system, we're going to relocate our AC vents. They're going to go from this position down a bit lower. No worries, the new unit brings along with it new ducts. We're going to retain the OEM CD player and controls below, although the air conditioning controls are going to now exist on this new system. Follow along if you want to see how this is done. In order to complete this job, we're going to need a socket set, some towels to protect parts while we remove them, panel remover tools, and everything supplied by CarLinkLife. The kit was well packaged, and it came with our new nav unit. A whole lot of cables, don't be intimidated too much by this. Ducting, and also an instruction booklet describing how to complete the installation and configuration. Check out the description below for the link to these products and anything else you might need to complete this project. We'll begin with disassembly. We're going to have to remove all of this, including some side panels here, over here as well. I'll use my panel remover tools and begin down here with removal of these panels. Simply insert your panel remover tool and pry. Pull that out. Also on this side, same thing. Remove the ignition panel by pulling. Pinch and remove your electrical clip. These two panels can be pulled out as well. If you break any of these clips upon removal, you can replace them. Link in the description below to get these. This panel as well. I am going to remove this center console here, so in order to do that, I had to plug back in the ignition button. I'm going to start the vehicle and move it into neutral. And before that, apply the parking brake on the vehicle. That's fully applied. Shift into neutral, and then turn off the vehicle. The reason I shifted into neutral is because later I'm going to have to remove all of this, and this shift knob will get in the way if I'm not in neutral. If instead I'm in park, that's going to be a problem. We're under the hood here, and before we get too far in the job, we want to remove this battery terminal so that we don't unintentionally short circuit and break something. So with the 12mm socket, let's remove this bolt and pull off this battery terminal so we no longer have power to the vehicle. Remove the shift knob simply by rotating counterclockwise. And it pops off. Remove this little panel by gently prying in this area with a tool. And that reveals some bolts that you're going to have to remove. Pull out those bolts with a 10mm socket. From here we should be able to gently pry and pull off the center console. Underneath the console we have some electrical connectors. You're just going to pinch and pull to remove these. And this is free. Eventually all this is going to move down here. So to protect all the vehicle pieces, I'll put a towel over this shift knob. And now we have some bolts. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts to remove. Pull out these bolts with a 10mm socket. And now I can pull out the OEM system. I'll set that here for now, and now this unit. On the back side of the original nav unit, pinch and pull all of these cables to remove. And this is completely free. On the back side of the CD player, also we have a bunch of connections there. This largest connector here, you have to pry up this lever. And now that can be removed. These other connectors, pinch and pull to disassemble. And our CD player is free now. we're gonna reuse it, so we'll set it off to the side. We can now get a first look at the new nav unit, and it's looking very nice. And behind it we have a whole lot of vacant space and some cables. Don't be too intimidated by these cables though. What I've noticed in similar vehicles is that all these little plugs fit only one receptacle. So figuring out where they go is just a matter of figuring out where each one of them fits. They can't be interchanged very easily. No promises here, but I imagine the same is true for this particular vehicle. So from here we can begin following the directions provided by the manufacturer. The disassembly of the original nav unit is described in some YouTube videos provided by the manufacturer. You can get to those videos by following the QR codes here and here. I already showed you though how I disassembled the nav unit. And now we'll follow these directions and make some connections to our electrical cables. Step 2 describes here connection of some camera parts. I do not have a reversing camera and I do not have this part here, so I imagine I can ignore this. We'll move on to step 3 and see how this works. Step 3 here appears to show the back side of our nav unit, so we'll make some connections here. All of our plugs are laid out. These are all provided by the manufacturer, so let's begin making some connections. This looks like cable number 1, the power extension cable, and it fits into this port here. This is the male end, so we'll find the female end and see if this plugs in correctly. And it does. Number 2 is called the power harness, and that's been provided by the manufacturer. It looks like this little plug here, they want me to plug into this port. This plug fits into only one port, down on this bottom left. Cables 3 and 4 are USB 1 and 2. Those are these cables, and they'll plug into their corresponding ports here and here. There's really no messing these up. They fit in only one port in one direction. Cable 5 is the reverse camera input. That's here. 6 is the RCA cable. 7 is the microphone, plugs into cable number 6. This cable is also labeled mic. Number 8 is a SIM card slot. That's already part of my cable number 6. Number 9 is the 9G antenna. This is labeled 4G, but I imagine it goes into here. And number 10 is the GPS. Plug that into here. And both of these wires you need to tighten onto the connectors by threading them on. We're back with the OEM navigation system, and we need to remove some things on here and reuse them on the new system. First is this cable here. This is the emergency light button cable. So free it from the OEM unit by cutting this zip tie. And to free this connector, just use a screwdriver and do some prying to get it off. Also, we need to reuse these clips. There's a few of them, 6, 7. And to release these, we'll use a pick and a screwdriver. Pick on one side, screwdriver on the other, and pop each one of these off. There's one. These clips that we removed from the OEM device can now be attached to the new navigation system. With plenty of padding in place, let's move now the new nav system. The screen is protected by all of the towels below. All right, we got a lot of wires going on here, but separate these as best as you can, right and left, and we need to install our air ducts now. One connection we forgot earlier is the stereo antenna that plugs into from the new harness into this port. And from this point, we're ready to begin making connections to our OEM cables. Admittedly, this part does look intimidating. We got a whole mess of wires, but like I said earlier, these cables connect only to one specific cable. They're polka yoke, it's called, and can fit also in only one orientation. So this is one of the first cables we'll connect to the vehicle. This we removed from the OEM stereo. It looks like these two cables fit together, so that's the right choice. We have a few more factory cables we have to plug in. Let's just find out where they fit. This black one appears that it fits down here, and it does, so that's the right choice. Also from the vehicle, we have these two cables. The white cable fits into this port nicely, so that must be the right choice. And this blue cable is for a 360 camera. My vehicle, though it does have this port, it does not have a 360 camera, so I don't need to use it. If you do have the 360 camera on your vehicle, you'll need to plug this into the provided part from CarLinkLife. Ducts for the left and right are placed onto the CarLinkLife system as shown here, and then use the manufacturer supplied screws to screw in 1, 2, 3 screws. And the other provided duct is similarly attached on the other side. This here is a power extension cable. It's not currently plugged into anything, so it's a matter of finding the plug that does plug into it, the one that fits. So we found the corresponding plug. These are plugs 1 and 2 from the supplied CarLinkLife harnesses. Recall, this is the wire we stole from the original nav unit. The opposite end of this plugs into whatever we can find that mates with it well. And we found it. They look like they fit together, and they do, so that's the right connection there. Moving along, we need to make some audio connections to these cables here. We're going to connect those together, the red to red and the white to white. From the factory harness, we have auxiliary in left and auxiliary in right. Those connect to the small little factory harness here, out right and audio left out. Red to red, white to white. Okay, so on the right hand side of our nav system, we're going to route a number of other cables. We have a microphone, a GPS, and I think this is some kind of Wi-Fi antenna. These need to be mounted in a place that I can get good reception. In the case of the microphone, I need to be able to speak into this clearly, so I want it near the driver's side. So you could mount these in different locations, but what I'm going to try to do is mount these two right underneath this speaker grill area here, avoiding the AC ducting. And the microphone, I'm going to sit right up here, and I'll mount that wire through, I'll try to anyway, this speaker grill. So you can see the speaker grill up here. I'm going to use a pry tool and gently pry up in this area. It's held on by some clips, so I can push from the bottom and pry from the top. It's coming up. And if you feel under here, you can find a hole right beside the speaker. And through that hole, I'm going to run my microphone cable. So I'll run my microphone up through this area, put it through the hole. This hole already exists. I have an adhesive backing. I can peel and stick this later on, but for now I'll just leave it set up here. And let's see how this grill snaps back down. That's pretty nice right there. The GPS and an antenna, we'll mount these as well. Peel off the adhesive backing, and I'm going to stick those in this area, keeping in mind that I want to avoid the AC ducting when that's installed. And this is the Wi-Fi antenna. Let's stick that in this area. That's good enough. It's out of the way. These cables are very long, so organize these as you will somewhere. All right, so I made two mistakes. The first is that I didn't follow the directions fully for installing my camera. I do have a factory rear camera. I do not have a 360 camera, so I need to follow these directions over here. What that means is the cable coming from the top end of the new nav unit has a number of yellow connectors. There's one marked camera. That is to connect to the yellow connector that is marked CCD AV in. The second mistake I made is at this connector here. I plugged in the OEM plug. You don't want to do that. Instead, you want to plug into it the CarLink plug, and at the opposite end of this cable right here, you want to plug into it this right here, the factory plug. If this is done incorrectly, as it was done with mine, the air conditioner won't work, but now everything does work fine. The manufacturer provided some insulation to install on these ducts 1 and 2. I already installed the insulation on this duct, and we'll do the same for the other duct. So pull off the paper backing and adhere it to the duct. It's as easy as this. The insulation is meant to ensure a tight fit between these ducts and these ducts here, minimizing AC and heating losses. We're nearly ready to lift this new nav unit into place. You can see I've tried to tidy up my wires a little bit. Some wires I wrapped up and shoved through here, the antennas, and then the microphone. It's going to be important as much as you can to separate the audio cables from the electrical cables. That's to ensure that you don't get weird noise in your audio sound. I also routed cables through the back here behind this mechanical support bracket, and they come downward and out the bottom here in this area. That's because these cables then are going to plug down in this area to the factory CD player that'll sit below. Okay, without breaking anything, let's see if we can move this into place. Give it a little push, and that looks pretty decent. Before we attach any bolts or do any more securing, we're going to attach these cables and power on everything, make sure it all works. So on the right hand side, we have a lot of the original factory cables, and these cables are mostly the CarLinkLife cables. This is still a factory cable. We're not going to be using, at least right now, these USB cables. We're also not going to be using this. So you could choose to tuck these away somewhere and hide them entirely. I'm going to route them out this area here. If you feel back with your hands in this area to the left near the driver's side, there's a little hole here. I'm going to stick those through here. Later I'll shove them up here, back out of view if needed, but this will give me some access to them if needed. So it's difficult to see in here, but I chose to run one of the USB cables and the SIM card slots in this corner here. I likely won't need them, and I can always shove them through this hole and disregard entirely. The other USB cable I routed down through this area behind these support brackets. That way I can, if I want to, after I find out what exactly this does, run it into the center console for access. Okay, so factory cables over here, largely CarLinkLife cables over to the left. We're gonna move our factory CD player into place and start making some connections. So our directions indicate that we need to connect the CarLinkLife power, audio, and radio antenna to the back side of the original CD player. And we're going to reuse some of the original factory connections otherwise to some of these other ports. But before we do that, let's make a few connections. This is the factory big, large power supply connector. That's going to connect to the end of the CarLinkLife connector. Also large, it's the only one that fits. Lock that down. This factory connector plugs nicely to the CarLinkLife connector on the left side, so that must be a fit. So let's move now our factory CD player into place and make some connections. The large CarLinkLife power connector plugs right into here. This one's tricky to see, but the CarLinkLife audio cable plugs into here. It's the only place it fits. CarLinkLife radio antenna plug fits into here, per the directions. Okay, it's tight and it's hard to see all the wires very clearly. A number of OEM cables I plugged back into their original locations, and it looks like everything is plugged in properly now. We're gonna put everything back into place and see if this turns on. We can also put in the factory CD player, so push your cables through so they're not pinched and move this into place. Just for testing, let's reconnect our battery and see if everything works.
By the way, does your bulky wallet hurt your butt when sitting on it in your back pocket? In your front pocket, does your fat wallet leave an unsightly silhouette? The thin wallet is exactly what you need. At only 6 millimeters thick when packed with 8 cards and cash, thin is less than half the thickness of the typical bifold or trifold wallet. The trick? Thin does not fold. Cards, cash, and wallet material are not all stacked on top of one another. Further, thin bends to conform to your body shape and movements. All the while, thin fits in your back pocket, front pocket, or bag. Thin wallet is comfortable, sleek, and invisible in your pocket. Order Thin, the world's slimmest wallet, at the link below. Your butt will thank you.
Even without the center console installed, we can see if everything functions. The new nav unit already powered on. This is a really good sign. If I shift to reverse, the rear camera image pops up. This is good. The radio works as well as the volume. I was able to connect via Bluetooth to the new nav system, and the audio works, navigation works, touchscreen is wicked fast. So everything appears to be fully functional at this point. As a result, we'll continue with reassembly, put the vehicle in reverse so we can assemble this guy. Reconnect all the connectors down here. 1, 2, 3. And there's 2 more over here. Shift knob. Tighten up this bolt. Reinstall your bolts and your few remaining trim pieces to finish off this job. Simply snap this trim piece back in place, followed by this trim piece. And finally, the trim pieces on the left and right sides of the center console. The new infotainment system does look very sharp. It really updates this car interior and it performs very well. I've driven it around a few weeks and I'm very happy with its performance. It boots up very quickly upon starting the vehicle, and it has all the apps and more than what I would expect. I can go into CarPlay, and it connects to my phone via Bluetooth rather quickly. I have Spotify playing, also connected to my phone. I found that I can download Google Maps directly to the nav unit computer. That allows me to run Google Maps without even my phone connected. Within CarPlay or Android Auto, I have plenty of other apps I can use. More can also be installed. The audio knobs function as well as all of the controls for the air conditioner. Though installation of this nav unit did require about 5-6 hours, I am very happy with it. You do have to be very careful while you're making all the electrical connections with all those cables of wires. That bundle of cables can be quite intimidating to work with, but you have to be willing to make a few mistakes, go back and correct those errors. If you run into trouble with your system in different units, you can navigate the settings menu to change from Celsius to Fahrenheit or kilometers to miles. Also, CarLinkLife is very responsive to messages. You can feel free to reach out and they'll help you with any problem you might encounter. One of the screens includes the climate control. You can control that from the touch screen, but you also have your typical controls down here. You can also access your radio via the antenna right here. Change stations simply like this, and you have your favorite stations. So I hope this helps you with your project.